Hello and a very warm welcome to the interview on France 24. I'm Sanam Chantier. In this edition, I'm joined by Jason Rezaian, an American-Iranian correspondent for the Washington Post, who was held in Iran's notorious Evin prison longer than any other international journalist. That's 18 long months. Now, Jason has shared his ordeal in a book published on January 22nd titled Prisoner, and he joins us from Washington, D.C. Jason, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thanks for having me on, Sanam.
Now, it's been 3 years since your release. Why did you decide to share your story now?
I had always planned on sharing this story. It was one of the things that sort of motivated me and helped me to feel a sense of hope that at some point I would get out of prison and I'd have the opportunity to write again in a public way. I didn't intend it for it to take 3 years, but it did. I had a lot of other things going on in my life, piecing freedom back together and healing my psychological scars. But it was something that I always intended to do.
Now, Jason, during your time in prison, you faced a myriad of accusations, everything from being a spy to being a sympathizer of the former terrorist group, the MEK, to fomenting a feminist revolution, to having an affair with a diplomat's wife. The question is, did all this make it feel like yours was a lost cause, or on the contrary, confirm that there was no actual case or evidence against you?
A bit of both. I think that during that time of so many rapid-fire accusations against me, I realized, okay, this is not a case in the traditional sense that I'm going to be able to fight in court and win, but it is one that I have a good chance of winning in the court of public opinion. And fortunately, I had so many advocates in the media, in my family. My employers, the Washington Post, were incredible. So, you know, there was this rising awareness about this injustice that my family and I were facing, and I think that made it possible for me to see a light at the end of the tunnel, even with this heavy set of accusations against me.
Now, Jason, there were some very surreal moments while you were in captivity. In one instance, your interrogators forced you to sing. Do you think there was a real strategy at hand, or did your captors at times get slightly carried away with this so-called obsession with the unknown, the US, what they refer to as the Great Satan?
Yeah, I think they got carried away more than once. You know, you're placed in this situation where you're in a vacuum that's unseen by the rest of the world. And at times, my captors would let their guards down and you know, act sort of chummy with me. And that was one instance where that shone through. A year and a half is a long time. So you form, for lack of a better word, relationships with people. And it's, I think it's kind of natural that there's some human moments, even though these people were terrorizing me to no end for 544 days.
And you do mention that your interrogator actually asked you to help him get a visa to the US when you're out. Was that in tongue-in-cheek? It just adds to how ludicrous this entire story is.
Well, Sanam, as somebody who spent a lot of time in Iran yourself, you know that that's a question that you get often, being a foreign national, that can you help me get to the other side of the world? It was surprising, though, that my main tormentor would take up that line, and you know, it was just one more reminder that this guy was an Iranian living under that system, although he worked for it.
Now, you ended up looking at the bigger picture in the middle of what you refer to as a tug-of-war between Tehran and Washington. You became a pawn in the nuclear negotiations. Was that a blessing or a curse for you?
I mean, I think that it was that political moment, that moment of negotiations and all of the people that were for it and against it, that culminated in me being arrested in the first place. I also believe that without those direct negotiations between the US and Iran, I wouldn't have been able to get out. As we see right now, there are several American detainees in Iran, and there's no dialogue between Washington and Tehran to speak of at the moment. And those people are languishing for very, very long periods of time, some of them, 3-4 years at this point. So I think it's a combination of both. It was the thing that got me locked up, and it was the thing that got me released as well. It's kind of strange.
And in your book, of course, Prisoner, we sense, and I don't know if this is the right word to use, some sense of resentment towards two major political figures. That's Barack Obama and Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, whom you essentially seem to hold accountable. Why these two particular figures? Because essentially they were at the helm of the negotiations whilst also finally securing your release.
Actually, I don't have any resentment towards Barack Obama. I think that, his administration ultimately was the one that brought me home, and he was, in a lot of ways, guiding that policy. Guiding
you
those
do say
efforts.
that you weren't coming home until Barack Obama decided you absolutely had to.
I think that that's often the case with hostages being held anywhere in the world, and you'll see that borne out, whether it's in Europe, here in the United States, that it has to become a matter of national interest that someone comes home, and I think in my case, that was certainly so. On the score of Javad Zarif, yeah, I have a lot of resentment towards him. He had a platform in which he could have walked back some of the things that other officials in Iran were saying against me, but he didn't. He fortified those arguments against me in every public opportunity that he had during that year and a half that I was in prison, even among my own colleagues from the Washington Post. So for that alone, I'd like Mr. Zarif to know that I'm watching, and I will hold him to account when he does this again to other people, as I'm sure he will.
Now, Jason, I want to talk about where you are right now. Some who've been in your position, previously imprisoned in Iran, have taken very strong positions when it comes to dealing with the Islamic Republic. Some calling for regime change, others for increased sanctions, but that doesn't necessarily appear to be the case with you.
No, I mean, look, I think the notion that we should be attacking Iran or further sanctioning Iran in a way that hurts the Iranian people, which is ultimately, as we know, one of the main effects of our sanctions policies, is not the way to go about it. And not talking to Iran also doesn't really fix the problem. So, I don't know exactly what the best approach would be, but the notion that we would rain bombs down on Tehran or do things to further undercut the economy in a way that will strangle the people of Iran from access to the global economy, it just doesn't sit well with me, because I've seen the results of that inside Iran and in the region as a whole, and it hasn't worked in the favor of the people of those countries at all.
Jason, speaking of these really draconian sanctions, the climate is very different today in comparison to the time of your release back in 2015. Do you right now have any glimmer of hope for the future of US-Iranian relations?
Not at this moment in time, but I always say that I'm bullish on the Iranian people. I have a lot of confidence in their wherewithal, their resilience, and also their great strength and resourcefulness. And I think that they'll survive this period and push for a freer, more representative government ruling over them in the future. But there's a lot of things that we in the West can do to help that, and I just don't see that happening at this moment.
Jason, your family is currently in the process of suing Iran. You're seeking millions of dollars in damages. But you actually battled with this decision because, as you explain in your book, Prisoner, it could have some negative repercussions.
Look, I thought long and hard about this, but ultimately it was an important decision for me and my mother and my brother to make, that we needed to seek justice. At this point in time, the only official narrative about what happened to me is the Iranian state narrative. And that one is riddled with falsehoods and and accusations and lies about me that they could never back up. I had the opportunity and the resources available to me to seek justice in an American court, and I did that because I want there to be a public record of what happened to me, what my family faced, and what other families are facing right now, so that the likelihood of this happening in the future is diminished, and I think it was the right thing to do.
Jason Rezaian, correspondent for The Washington Post and the author of this book, Prisoner. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on France 24. It
was a pleasure.
And thank you for watching this edition of The Interview with me, Sanam Chantier.